Hello, everyone. Just wanted to say a massive thank you for coming to our power session. In this kind of session, we're going to look towards talking about why young people should be involved in terms of change making and feedback, and essentially why we need to upholster young voices in the conversation surrounding educational inequality. So we're just going to start off with a couple of introductions. I'll go first. Hello, my name is Oghale. You might have heard me speak in the beginning. I am a 19-year-old university student at the University of Oxford, studying psychology and philosophy. And outside of that, I'm also a member of the youth steering group at the Fair Education Alliance. I'm really passionate about influencing change, especially in terms of educational inequality. And I feel like being part of the FEA is a really great way that I can do that.
Hi, I'm Amelia. I'm a co-founder of Project Hope. And I am 24 and I'm currently a software developer.
Hi, I'm Naomi. I'm the other co-founder of Project Hope. I'm 24 and I work as a participation worker and I'm a former youth consultant at the FEA.
Hello, I'm Ellie. I'm the loud Scouse member of the youth steering group. In 2017, I became the first member of my family to go to university, and it was here that I got a part-time job at the Tutor Trust, supporting students across primary and secondary schools like the ones that I attended in Merseyside. I still work with the Tutor Trust as a tutor engagement manager, ensuring that our pool of tutors are trained and prepared to support the students who need it most across Greater Manchester, Merseyside and Leeds Bradford. So we would like to show you a video of our other youth steering group members answering why they believe youth engagement is critical to reducing inequality in education.
So one of the questions that we're really interested in asking is why youth engagement is so critical to reducing educational inequality, and then we're going to each take it in terms of like talking about how we perceive that question and what our answers are. So for me, I think it is really important to include young people in terms of reducing educational inequality, because I genuinely believe that we need that lived experience and that understanding. It's one thing to make a policy, or it's one thing to like have some sort of program or a system, but if you're having that system or program or policy and you're not understanding what the effects of that policy could be, then that I believe is genuinely a problem. So if we're listening to young people, we can understand what they experience and why, one, we need to take these policies so seriously, and two, we can understand what type of policies or what type of changes need to be happening in terms of like benefiting young people through their lived experience.
For me, it's about actually every single young person has a voice. We know every single adult has a voice, and actually young people deserve to be heard. Young people deserve to be heard on every issue that affects them. And actually, it's really easy to listen to young people, but it's harder to act. And as adults, most of you are, actually you have the opportunity to listen to that young person's voice and actually act upon it and take their voice and ensure that it's being heard.
Yeah, I agree, and it is so vital to get perspectives from young people from different demographics of the UK. I grew up in Dovecot, Liverpool, to two working class parents who tried really hard to make ends meet. This isn't a unique story, as I'm sure most of you know. Most of my classmates were also on free school meals. However, it bothered me that children like me, who were on free school meals and from low income backgrounds, did not have the same opportunities as others, and this seems to have only grown truer with time. We need more support for students and teachers in the most disadvantaged areas to prepare young people for their futures. It is crucial to understand the experience of these young people so that we can continue working to close the attainment gap and tackle the issues in our current climate, such as the cost of living crisis, which now threatens to make university unattainable to those from low-income backgrounds.
And I think for me, it's about the empowered learners or engaged learners. I think we know that young people in this generation are not just the leaders of the future, but the leaders of today. We're watching time after time that it's young people who are making the difference in the world today, from the climate movement to what we're seeing with mental health and the increased conversation. That's come from young people, and if we don't engage them, then they won't be empowered to take that change.
Video.
Take two.
Hi there, we are the Youth Steering Group for the Fair Education Alliance.
As a young student myself, I believe it is absolutely vital that the education sector should listen to the younger demographic, mainly because we have the most information about the education system and its strengths, its weaknesses. And the reason we have this information is because we are going through it right now, and many politicians and prime ministers or anyone important, they went through a very different education system about, let's say, 30, 40 years ago.
Let's face it, Parliament isn't that representative.
just as they don't always know the latest trends and crazes.
They don't understand how education has changed, particularly after COVID.
The groups that don't sit in Parliament get left behind.
But young people don't forget those kids.
Because they are those kids.
So when we campaign for policy, we make sure that no one gets left behind.
Only then can policy cater for everyone. And
it's important that we listen to young people because it's the most effective and productive way to enact policies and schemes that young people will actually use. We need to listen to the unheard voices of UK politics to ensure that we are bettering society.
In a word, experience. Young people have the experience of the system. We're going through it, we all have recently been through it. So we know ourselves where our experience could be improved, how it could be optimised, how it could be made better.
Youth voice is incredibly important for politicians and the education sector to see how different students are affected by policy. I feel like policies and attitudes towards students and in the education sector are revolved around assumptions, and it's really important that people hear how students experience different policies,
have the most experience of the system, and they have the new innovative ideas. We really need to develop it and bring the education sector forward.
Yeah, I think listening to young people would really help reduce inequality in education, because young people aren't just, it's not just statistics, young people have true stories that you can learn from. I think so often we look at policy in terms of statistics without really understanding the stories behind them, the people behind them. And so by getting those individual perspectives, you're really putting detail onto those statistics.
Yeah, and I think young people know their own experiences and the experiences of people around them.
It's important for policymakers and decision makers to speak to young people, in particular young people from a lower socioeconomic background in regards to educational inequality, because we really need to tackle down on that disadvantage gap and the attainment gap within the education sector from reception all the way to sixth form.
Totally agree, and I think you need an authentic voice in order to get better policies, more relevant policies. As a pupil premium child on free school meals myself, it's so important to me that this attainment gap is closed and it stops it from widening further.
I think that the government and policymakers shouldn't make any decision that impacts young people without first consulting young people.
And I want to add that it's important that if we are taking young people's opinions, that we take a variety of opinions from different students, from different cultures and backgrounds, so that you understand what each different type of student goes through and how to make the education system suit them.
Okay. Speaking of the report card, and as we've acknowledged from the Youth Engagement Working Group, FEA members and others in the sector are beginning to increase their youth engagement. The Youth Sector Group have valued the opportunities, the Youth Steering Group have valued the opportunities they've been given to put their views forward to policymakers at Ofsted and Number 10, but this should be the norm rather than the exception. The Fair Education Alliance are committed to working with young people as equal partners, which is why one of the key chapters in the 2022 report card is all about sharing power and empowering young people. The chapter reflects the work done as we co-created the Youth Engagement Strategy, and feedback from the Youth Steering Group and members and other sector stakeholders involved in the Youth Engagement Working Group. Additionally, in the run-up to the Fair Education Alliance 2022 report card being published, they consulted with youth representatives from 12 member and sector stakeholder organisations. These include the British Youth Council, NCS and UK Youth, on the change they believe is needed to increase the representation of young people in education.
No, absolutely, and just to echo that, some of the recommendations that were put forward by this power chapter ultimately run under this theme of ensuring that we have a diverse set of young people who can ensure that they are inputting themselves on decisions that affect them directly. So, for example, these happen in two ways, one of which would be in organisations that directly serve young people, and this could be, for example, the third sector, charities, schools, and in that respect, we recommend that that there is this open communication between young people and the third sector and schools, and ensuring that these young people and their families are included in the decision-making process. So for example, that could be co-designing different programs or like ensuring that they are allowed to give feedback on the school policies or whatever it is that's going on right now. And the second way in which we recommend that change is made is through government and policymakers. So for example, the Department of Education or Ofsted or Ofqual, they should be actively seeking the input of young people, because ultimately the decisions that they make are going to be the decisions that affect these young people that they should be seeking the inputs of. And as Ellie will touch on in this next bit, it can't be just something that happens on a few occasions. It needs to be this continuous change that they're putting in to ensure that they're continuously affecting young people in the best ways that they can.
Yeah. Everybody in this room, whether you're a head teacher or CEO, has a responsibility to ensure there is a system in place for young people's voices to be heard. Whether this is through bringing young people into important decision making or seeking feedback on school policies or programme development. Additionally, as Oghale said, it is equally vital for the government and policymakers to seek young people's input on policy. This is the only way of ensuring school or the education system remains accountable for the young people they serve. Young people are the best experts on their own experiences. It is essential that they are seen as equal collaborators rather than a tokenistic tool used to fit someone else's agenda. Thank you. We're going to hand over to Amelia and Naomi.
We're going to shake things up a bit. I know people have just finished eating and they're probably in that, right, I'm paying attention, but I kind of need to get a bit moving. So we're going to play a little bit of a game. If anyone's ever engaged with anything we've done before, you have probably played this game, and it's called Raise Your Hand If. I'm sure most people can manage that. If we ask you a question, if it applies to you or you're like, yes, that's me, put your hand up in the air. Don't be shy, because eventually we're hoping everyone in this room will put their hand up to at least one question. To get it started, we're going to start off nice and easy. Raise your hand if you have learned something today. Nice to see most people.
Raise your hand if you have ever had a young person drop out of an opportunity last minute.
Again, a lot of people. Your next one, have you ever ran something online with no one having cameras on? I'm actually shocked that's as low as it is.
Have you felt too old to work with young people?
There's a few cheeky hands there where you're kind of like, ooh, like, don't quite want to admit that. Raise your hand if you have ever felt nervous before running an activity with young people. That had a few braver hands, that did.
Have you ever run a workshop with young people?
Nice to see a lot of people have. Have you ever struggled to think of a good icebreaker? There was quite a lot of chuckles to that one. Good to know.
Have you ever played the game Two Truths and a Lie with a group of young people?
I'm actually shocked at the number of people who haven't. If you've not, see those people who put their hand
You're in my good books if you haven't.
Have you ever sat in a meeting with young people and thought that it is too long?
Been unsure of how to engage younger teenagers?
Oh, a few is in that category. And your last one, felt like you were running something that you wouldn't have enjoyed as a child or a young person. The fact that there's a group of people in the middle who put their hand up before I'd even finished the question. Just something to think about there.
So that's the end of our Raise Your Hand Ifs, but hopefully it's shown you that many of the people in the room are all facing the same challenges and experiences with engaging with young people. So we're now going to introduce our scale, which is hopefully going to appear. So this is a scale that was developed by us, completely by young people, to talk about what good youth engagement looks like. This scale isn't to say that we need you to be right on this end or at that end, but actually that you can be at all of these different stages all at once or at different stages in different projects. The key is that you have a variety, because for different young people, they will need different kinds of engagement. Different types of opportunities suit different young people, and we're going to talk you through what that can look like. One of the key things that is important that we want to come through in all of these stages is actually the relationships that you have with young people. That's the important part. If you celebrate the young people, if you value them, and you create those meaningful relationships with them, they're going to feel empowered and they're going to feel able to engage in that work.
So we're going to start off right at this end of the scale. Caveating what Naomi said, this is the one place please do not be. Whatever you do, involve a young person. Involve more, preferably. Having no young people, we've probably all seen it. It's quite common. But actually, it shouldn't be the case. As already mentioned, all four of us have said actually the importance of having young voices in the room. Having no young people is literally that. You've consulted, you've spoken, you've not done anything to engage young people. And I don't really have to tell you why this is bad, but it is. Young people should be able to talk about whether it's their curriculum, whether it's simply just having a view on something. Every young person has an opinion, just like us as adults do. We saw that very much with Raise Your Hand If. Everyone here had an opinion. Now, the reason why this is such an issue is actually we often forget that we're doing things that affect young people. We need to ensure that their voices are heard. Now, some bad practices of this sometimes is we have panels that are talking about things related to young people without having a young person sat on that panel. Maybe we've run a group and it's looking at young people, but we've not got a young person involved in any point of that. An easy way to overcome this, especially for events that are happening during the day when young people are at school or work and they can't attend or it's far, is actually just having a video. We saw that really nice video capturing so many young people's voices. But actually, that's involving young people. They might not be here today, but their voices have been heard. So it's just a really easy thing to move you from that no young people to potentially the next step.
So then we move on to youth consultation. And this is the stage where you might have identified an issue, and actually you just want some young people's opinions on it. You want to look at what that looks like, what they feel about it, and that might look like a survey or a workshop that you run, but it's just that kind of wide-scale engagement. We saw this a lot during COVID, so I saw a number of organizations putting out surveys to young people to ask about their experiences of the pandemic. In our opinion, this wasn't the best practice we could have seen, because actually all these organizations were asking for exactly the same information for young people, and rather than collaborating and letting their guards down over the protectiveness of their own organizations, they actually could have collaborated and collected all of that information from all of those different young people, but all been able to use it. So that is what we'd recommend if you're doing this. It might also look like going into a school, for example, and running a really interactive activity with young people that actually gathers their opinions, but in a fun and engaging way that doesn't require them to fill out a survey or just write information.
So moving now to youth participation. This, I reckon, is probably when most of those hands were like, yeah, I think this is where we probably are. Now, the basics of this is you're involving young people through typical engagement. This is often running little groups, getting young people's opinions, but more than that, it's often for a purpose. For example, designing a campaign. You might actually have the young people working on it and they're participating in something, and it's kind of that two-way type thing. With this, the key thing, regular often works best. This is really a great point where you can build relationships with young people, where actually in youth participation, you get to know what the young people enjoy, what they struggle with, and actually you can support them to learn those new skills. With this, typical greats is don't just do it as a one-off. Give them a few different opportunities to participate in different things. It's really crucial to allow young people to learn, do they like standing up here, or do they rather sit down here? I'll tell you now, I'd rather be down there. But actually, it allows young people to learn those skills, and actually it helps massively when they then get to a career. They've learned, okay, I can talk in front of 10 people and then be put in this massive room and learn they can kind of do it. Barriers to this is favoritism. This is very, very common, and sadly is too common. Youth participation should be accessible to a wide group of young people, but with this, being aware that if you stretch your numbers too wide, you're no longer offering good, useful engagement and youth participation. Young people want to be able to learn and grow, and that's a fine balance. But with this, you can't keep picking the same young people every single time, because what that says to the rest of the young people is, my voice doesn't matter, why should I speak? Where actually, you're kind of going backwards. You're going back to actually, I'm involving a very select group of young people, but I'm telling the rest that their voices don't matter. So just be really careful on the favoritism side of this, because it's something that actually a lot of us fall in without even realising.
So then we move on to collaboration. So this is where young people are shared decision makers. It might look like young people come up with an idea for something and you actually agree to take part in that and you co-produce maybe a toolkit or something that is a resource that can be shared widely. It might also look like having young people on your trustee board where they have the same role as the older trustees on the board. They have the same power in decision making in that situation. So great can look like young people having that idea and coming to you and saying, actually, we feel like child poverty is a really big issue at the moment, and we want you to create a toolkit that we can help and use in our school so that we can talk about it. Can we make this together? And actually, you sit down with that group, you create that toolkit together, and then they are able to take that off and use it. But it can also be difficult to engage some young people at this level of the scale. We don't want to deny that. For some young people, this would be far too overwhelming. And actually, they might want to engage at a lower level to start with and build up their confidence to the point where they feel able to have their voices heard. I think it's an experience we can all relate to, of being in a room where you feel like you actually can't speak up. And I've seen too many spaces that claim to be that shared decision-making. They claim to be collaborating with young people. But actually, the young people in that space aren't speaking. The adults are the only ones we're hearing from because the young people don't feel able to speak up. I've also seen it done tokenistically, where young people are just brought into the room just so that it looks like there's young people in the space. Having 50-50 young people and adults in a room doesn't mean that that shared decision-making and collaboration is happening if those young people aren't empowered to have a meaningful role in whatever that is that you're doing.
So moving now to potentially some things where there's going to be a few, where do we sit? First one is supported youth-led. Now, I'm going to caveat this with, this is often where most organisations think they are. They would say that actually, oh no, we're not supported youth-led, we'll be fully youth-led, but actually you're more than likely in supported. Supported youth-led is basically allowing young people to take the lead, but having an adult paid member of staff supporting them. It's a massive jump from collaboration to fully youth-led, and supported youth-led is an amazing place to be when it's done well. With this often looks great when you've got young people who are given ownership over a budget. Maybe they've decided they're going to put on an event. Or in schools, you often see it when young people, they want to create a little fair, they want to kind of do something, and the school say, this is your budget, but you've got teachers, you've got staff who are helping the young people make those decisions, but the young people are ultimately owning them. But the staff are going away and doing the slightly more difficult thing of actually, this actually costs X, Y, Z, and helping that money come to that pot. This can often be a fine line of taking full control and giving the young people the full control. Supported youth-led looks where you've given the young people the control. The young people are making the decisions. The adults aren't. The adults are simply going, we can support you to do this. We're going to give you the skills that you need. It might be actually young people want to do something, but they have no clue where to start. And as adults, you can say, well, we'll give you this training, and the young people can go from there. Barriers to this is organisations can get scared. They can get really scared of making mistakes, letting young people make mistakes, and automatically taking control. We all know we've all probably got here to our jobs or whatever we're doing by making at least one or two mistakes. I think we can all agree with that. We've all made mistakes, and actually young people have got to learn to make those mistakes. And as organisations, charities, schools, it's hard to see someone make a mistake and not automatically go, well, I can solve it, I can clean it up. But actually it's helping young people to learn to make those mistakes now, and as an organisation supporting those young people to make those mistakes and not just leaving them and mopping it up straight after them.
So then finally, at the far end of our scale, we have completely youth-led. So this, I think our organisation, Project Hope, is a good example of what a fully youth-led organisation looks like. We were an organisation set up during the pandemic. It came from my idea, and then a tweet, and then a group of 20 young volunteers, and suddenly it became something so much more. We've never had any adults part of the project, although for a while, we were a bit scared that maybe we would need them for safeguarding reasons. We actually realized we already had that expertise in our team amongst us. So we got rid of the adults and continued to run the project ourselves. So that's what being fully youth-led looks like to us. It means that there are just young people running the project. And actually, if you're sat here in this room thinking, well, like, I'm an adult and I work for this organization, we can't ever be at fully youth-led. Fully youth-led doesn't have to be the whole organization. It can be a project within the organization where you really just hand over ownership. It could be that you provide funding to the community to allow them to create that change themselves. It can look so many different ways, but when you do it, it creates amazing change. The amount of youth-led organizations that I now know who are just creating the most amazing change in their communities is just incredible. A barrier to this can be, though, that, as we've said earlier, for some young people, this is just a massive task. They may not know where to start. They may not feel like they have the connections to be able to do those things. But that's where your organizations can come in. Reach out to those young people, create those connections. One of the best parts of my experience has been actually working with organizations who've gone, I think what you're doing is great. Let us invite you to come and speak at this event. Let us do those things. Because actually empowering those youth-led organizations in your communities to have that voice and to speak, as well as collaborating with your organization, will make the biggest difference.
We're now going to do a little Menti to kind of get you thinking. I'm hoping it will appear. Ta-da. What we want you to do is reflect personally where you would rate yourself on your youth engagement. You have the options of, we don't do any, which would kind of equate to our not at all. You've got weak, okay, good, and absolute best practice. Have a little think where you would place yourself, your organisation, and vote. I'm hoping most people now have used Menti. You can scan the QR code or type the code, and in a moment we'll see all the results hopefully flooding in, and I'm hoping there'll be lots. It's very weird because people keep putting their phones up and I have to remember they're scanning the QR code. Maybe a few more seconds to just scan it if you've not got it. And sorry. So this is where the results currently are. We've got a large group of people who think they're in the weak category. I'm hoping for some people this might also be slightly useful to know that actually you're not alone. I think it's really easy to be like, oh, everyone else is doing it amazingly and we're failing, or vice versa. But actually this is quite encouraging. Got 2 seconds left. I think that's our end.
Yeah. So we're now going to go into some table discussions. So anybody who's sat right at the back, because I can see loads of people sat on the chairs, if you want to move forward and sit around a table, or just create your own little groups in the back. You're going to be looking at the question, how are you going to contribute to ensuring young people are given the opportunity to participate in decisions affecting their education, whether that's in your organisation or influencing decision makers? We want you to have a look at that question, and as before in the table discussions for anyone that was in here, we want you to use the Menti to then let us know your thoughts.
So if I could just get your attention again, guys, thank you very much for that discussion. I think we're just going to round in and try and get some people's opinions and develop more on what people have said. So do you want to kick off?
Yeah, so if you've not already, please fill in the Menti, post your ideas. We're going to kick off. There was a really interesting one on the Menti about ensuring that they've got 2 young trustees. I don't have a clue who put it on, but it seems simple to do. I know it's much more complex, but actually it's something to consider if you're not already doing that. If anyone in the audience has something they want to say, if you raise your hand, we have 2 people who are going to move around with microphones. Do not be scared. Someone is going to raise their hand eventually. Otherwise I'll start picking on people. Oh, there we go, in the middle. So once the first person's done it, it's less scary. No. We're also used to just being in
Sorry,
control.
that was me. Sorry, just so to say, so we work with connecting young people and politicians, do a lot of thinking about political contact and how we can support young people for those engagements. And one thing we see a lot in our work is that actually decision makers are terrified of working with young people, and they themselves need training and support to help to engage. And I guess a question for you guys is, what do you think that, you guys are clearly leading on this, doing a lot of thinking about it. What can you do to put people's kind of mind at ease that this stuff is not as difficult as it seems, and that engaging with young people is going to be straightforward?
Nice challenging question, thanks. I guess one thing is, you guys work with young people. Actually, how can you ensure that those decision makers who aren't necessarily listening to young people, how can you ensure that they have got a young person in the room? How can you ensure that actually they're learning to engage with a young person? Because you guys here know how to engage with young people. And as an adult, you have learnt those skills, you've learnt how to do that. So I'd kind of push it back on you guys slightly, just to be mean. But you guys have the ability to teach other decision makers how to engage young people.
Absolutely, and just to kind of add to that, I think it's really interesting that some adults are afraid to work with young people. I've never heard that before, but thank you for highlighting it. I think it's really good to kind of understand that all the young people that I know, and I think all young people, generally you'll find when you speak to them have almost the same aims as you, like they want things, like outcomes that are good. And essentially, if you guys can work together and just kind of take away that barrier of being afraid of things going wrong, because as you guys have touched on, like things are going to go wrong. They're young people, we make mistakes, we're growing, that's all right. But it's just allowing that space for things to go wrong. And I think you just need to get rid of that fear and accept, okay, it might not go right all the time, but the outcome of this will be a great outcome that both parties kind of want to ensure. So I think that's why it's really important to ensure that you're including these young people, even if it is scary at first.
Has anyone got one right at the front? And we'll come to this one at the front with someone with a microphone.
Forgot I had a microphone.
Thank you. I'm Cassie. I am from the Edge Foundation. We work in research, policy, and delivery in the education space. And I just wanted to kind of build on that question with something we're trialing with our youth network. We found that when it comes to working with politicians, young people sometimes don't feel like what they're hearing from them is authentic or necessarily meaningful. And politicians, as you said, are terrified of engaging with young people in some ways. And so what we are trying to do is get our youth network together, have a conversation, and invite someone influential, maybe an MP, a policymaker, to just sit and listen. Just don't say anything, don't join the conversation, just sit and listen and make notes and talk and listen to the young people talk to each other. That means the young people feel safe, they feel like they're being heard and not interrupted, and it's also, very low effort for the MP or whatever adult it is that you're working with. So that's something we're trying out. So far, our young people are really excited about it. They feel like empowered as well, and so that is a great way to start making change and involving young people. So that's my suggestion to you.
That's something that's really easy to do. That's something that's definitely really easy to do. And actually, if you're working in a charity, how often do the young people talk to a CEO? Just an idea out there. There was someone somewhere middle, the guy right at the middle back. He's not quite at the back, he's not quite in the naughty sector.
Thank you. My name is Dave. I work with the Visionaries. There was a really great point coming up on our table which you alluded to earlier, but I think it would be really helpful to hear a bit more perhaps of your expertise and advice on this. How do we deal with the usual suspects, the same faces showing up, the more privileged young people being more able to access these opportunities? Like, really, speaking frankly, how do we get past that and beyond that? Really open to some help.
I'm slightly annoyed that I'm here and Naomi's down there, but if you give the microphone to Naomi, she'll give you a really good answer.
I mean, no pressure, but sure. I think one of the things that we've spoken a lot about is, like, particularly when you're engaging with young people from schools, if you ask the teachers to pick the young people, it doesn't work. So I was one of those young people in school who just very much was under the radar and actually was never picked for anything because I was seen as not confident, not engaged, like not part of it. And actually, I had to go out and seek that opportunity, and I was lucky enough that I had the confidence to do that at that point. So I think a lot of it is about actually targeting young people and making groups that are like deliberately like representative. So going into those communities, into those spaces where those young people are. So whether it's you go into a school and actually, instead of saying to the teachers, like, please identify some young people, instead you say, actually, can I work with the young people who are on free school meals or who are under pupil premium? Because actually you can build those relationships. But the reality is also with that engagement, it will take longer. So you need to take the time to build those relationships to make the young people feel safe and to really show them that actually their voices do matter. Because I think for a lot of those young people, they grow up being told, actually, your voice doesn't matter in this situation. And so you really have to do that groundwork first.
Thank you. We're going to begin to wrap up. I know people still probably have questions. We are going to still be around, so feel free to talk to us. We're not scary. We've spoken to you guys. You guys can now talk to us.
Perfect. Key takeaways? Right, lovely. So I think it might be good to go through just our really quick key takeaways. Just not to hang on to it, but I really like the stuff about you guys being scared of young people. That's really interested me, really intrigued me. And I think what I would take away is that in terms of adults and young people, I think a lot of the time the divide is adults thinking they know what young people's problems are and what they're thinking. And if anything, this has just made me realize that the discussion needs to happen and that young people need to be at the forefront of those conversations. So we as a collective need to ensure that we're including young people and making sure that we're not just bringing our assumptions of what we think their problems are and actually listening to what they think their problems are, because if anything, they're the ones going through the problem, so they would know.
I'm fine with this microphone. I thought it was really interesting hearing all of your views, especially on, adding younger trustees into organisations, but also how adults can be quite scared of having, those meetings with younger people and not having a direction. But I think it's just being more solution focused and making sure there is a goal and you all have a common goal in mind. I think that's it.
I think for me, again, it was kind of on the young trustees point. Like, I've heard a couple of tables talking about it when I was going around listening to conversations. And actually what I was hearing was a lot of people saying, maybe, like, we don't want young people on our board because maybe it's too boring for them. I just, like, the reflection I have on that is actually, like, there are a lot of things that you can change your board culture to make it more engaging. Like, the adults in the room don't care for the boring stuff either. And the amount of conversations I've had with CEOs of organizations who don't even understand the finances. So why are we putting the pressure on the young people to understand the finances? And that's the reason we can't engage them. So that's kind of my key takeaway is think about changing your culture. If that's a problem and they're boring, you can make the whole organization better by changing it.
I feel like that's really hard to follow. But I'm going to go back to the one, I said the raise your hand if you've ever made young people do something that as a young person or a child you wouldn't have enjoyed. Like, let's just remember that everyone here has been a child. Everyone here has been a young person. You might not be one now. I'm about to age out of being a young person and I'm absolutely terrified. But if you didn't enjoy it, would a young person now enjoy it? Like, just consider that. But also, I had a really cool conversation with a table over at the back about hybrid online. Like, just remember that during the pandemic, everything was online. You suddenly engage with young people who might not have normally engaged, where maybe they're in a hard-to-reach area, maybe they've not got a parent who can drive. But just remember, don't just necessarily move everything back to being in person. Remember, hybrid is just as important. Remember the young people you've engaged with online. And for some young people, that's the easiest way to start engaging, because they can have their camera off however much we all hate it. That's always an opportunity.
Oh,
is it time?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Just want to start by saying how fantastic it's been. I have the privilege of working with Oghale and Ellie on the Youth Steering Group. I'm Becca, I'm the Youth Engagement Manager at the Fair Education Alliance, and I got to work with Naomi when she joined us as a youth consultant, and Amelia was on our youth strategy group when we co-developed our strategy with young people. So a massive thank you for them. As they said, they're going to be around, and I really do encourage you to speak to them afterwards. So there are a few things that we want to do to keep this conversation going. So the first one is, it is I Will Week. Tony is in the middle. Tony, can you stand up or wave? From the I Will movement. And one of the really concrete things that your organization can do, and you could do it today or tomorrow to mark I Will Week, is sign the I Will Power of Youth Charter. And this is showing how you as an organization are committing to supporting young people to do youth social action and supporting youth leadership. So if you have any questions about that, speak to Tony or you can speak to me. The second one is I'm now running one-to-ones. I've been running these over the last year or so with organizations that are really looking to take their youth engagement to the next step. So being able to support people to set up their youth steering groups, co-develop their youth engagement strategies, think about that recruitment around making sure those diverse voices are there. If that's something that you're interested in, you're going to get an email at 5 o'clock today with all the follow-up from it, and there's a link there for you to email me to set that up. And then we have members, and there were so many, I couldn't fit them all on a slide, so this is just a small selection of them, who are doing really fantastic youth engagement work already. So I really encourage you to speak to them and learn from them. You've got Bite Back, who we're going to hear from Tasha shortly on the board, doing really fantastic youth-led campaigning. We've got Be Well, who have involved young people in designing the strategy, looking at young people's mental health in Manchester. Smart School Councils, they are doing brilliant work around involving young people, including primary school students, in school-level decision-making. We've got States of Mind, who are doing some really brilliant youth-led research on the impact of Ofsted on young people's mental health. We've got First Give and RSA that are looking at youth social action in schools. So that's looking at the full range of from primary school through secondary and then into sixth form. The Association of Citizenship Teaching, so providing those resources for teachers to be able to do exactly this as well, making sure that young people are ready to take on those roles as active citizens in our society. And Ormiston, final one, around their embedding youth social action and youth participation in every single subject for every year group across their schools, which is a really fantastic place for us to be looking. And then there are two of our collective action working groups that are dedicated to youth engagement. The first one is our Youth Participation Collective Action Working Group, and this one is starting early in the new year. And this is specifically for FEA members and young people associated with FEA members to come together to advocate for greater youth engagement at government level. So we really have our eyes on Ofsted and DFE as our targets at the start, and we're going to be working to advocate for young people to be heard and respected in all decisions affecting their education, and specifically for young people who have faced barriers to accessing a fair education. And then finally, the I Will Education Sector Group. So this is more of a community of practice, and we've been running this over the last year with workshops led by young people and our members, where we are sharing best practice and learning from each other, and an opportunity to ask those questions, which you might be nervous to ask, but when you're with your peers, and young people are there to speak to as well. We're finding that really, really helpful. And this is open to anyone in the education or youth sector. They can just email, as you will get in the email coming out, youth@faireducation.org.uk, and they can get involved. And we host those quarterly now. So I just want to finish there. We have refreshments served now, same place that you've been going, and we will see you back here for the panel on influencing change coming up next. Thank you, everybody.